On this episode of the show, I have with me Nilo Rahmani. She is CEO and co-founder of Thoras AI, and we're going to be talking about the observability market and a lot of adoption that is or is not happening. We're going to ask her how that's going. We're going to be talking about some of the current challenges in the market. We're going to talk a little bit about how the end user experience looks if you are actually applying AI. Talk a little bit about applying ML to the solution. And she mentioned no more fire drills, and obviously we'll ask her how Thoras is helping with that. Nilo, thanks for joining the show.
Happy to be here, Amir. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Can you tell us what the company does before we dive in?
Yeah, so Thoras is a predictive scaling platform for Kubernetes, and it's really a double-edged sword. Not only can we bring up your utilization, since we can see traffic patterns before they actually happen and anticipate spikes, in turn that brings down cloud costs, but we can also reduce things like startup latency and increase the efficiency of applications that are running in Kubernetes. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to dive into the main part of the show in a second, but I did want to maybe just touch on, because you referenced a lot of changes happening within the engineering world in the context of developer tools. And obviously we're going to get your thoughts on where that sits within the observability market. Before we get there, it would be nice to kind of understand what are some of the current tools, what are some of the limitations, what are some of the challenges being seen, and then we'll go from there.
So, in the sort of AI adoption, world today, we're seeing developers rapidly be able to start using new products, right? You have Cursor, that's incredible. You have, AI products that are helping you write tests, and just in general, move the needle with software development 100x faster than it used to be. And that's great, right? It helps everyone be more efficient. And, it reduces having to debug and troubleshoot your code when you can have someone, or in this case, AI, figure out exactly what, might be the problem. But with reliability engineering, it's a lot different. And we're going to see, I think, the landscape be a little bit different, in my opinion. So I like to say that reliability engineers and DevOps engineers, the whole industry, it's a very thankless job, right? There's usually not attention on us unless there's a problem. So when there's an outage or some sort of an issue related to performance, that's when there's attention on us, and it's usually not good attention. For the most part, we're happy, everyone's happy if things are operational and there's no attention, right? And for that reason, it's a very high stakes job. We go through these on-call rotations where you're just like a doctor. You pretty much have a pager and you're on call 24/7 for critical applications. And without these applications being available, the business can't operate. So it's a loss of revenue. It's a loss of productivity. It's just not good all around. So in that time frame that you're on call during your rotation, it's incredibly high stakes. And so you're going to do everything to make sure that your team doesn't ever experience an outage or, any sort of performance issue. So when it comes to, AI adoption, I think, the reliability industry is a lot more sensitive to what tools that they bring in because of how nuanced some of the failure modes that we deal with are.
Absolutely. I guess you mentioned, the adoption. You mentioned DevOps being and reliability engineering being a thankless job, and only in times of crisis is attention kind of brought on. I guess let's peel back a little bit. When you're looking at the job itself, and you're looking at when and what DevOps and reliability engineers have to do, when you compare that to engineering and you look at the tools out there, is it just going to be always easier to help with the automation of code writing and test cases and all those different things you mentioned within the engineering space compared to something like reliability DevOps engineering, or is it just a case of it hasn't gotten the attention yet?
I think that what we do is very niche. There are some shops that make reliability engineering as part of best practices for developers. But as a company grows and becomes larger, you really do need a team of strategists that can manage not only the infrastructure, but the tooling that we provide to developers. So a lot of times we like to call ourselves like the ones that will, increase productivity for a developer. So it really does vary case by case. I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but
yeah, and I guess when you look at the job itself, it is niche. Is it? And I guess when it comes to the wider engineering team, there's a lot of code being generated by many software engineers. So I could see the importance of trying to automate some of that. That's a big dollar. It's a big dollar cost. When it comes to DevOps, reliability engineering, how do you see the AI tools market playing out? Is it a case more of human in the loop? Is it more case of, hey, we can actually automate some of this so it's hands off, or how does that potentially look with tools adoption?
Yeah, you're right. Like as developers are making changes to systems on a daily basis, right? They need to be empowered to get that to production safely, right? And also they rely on us to make sure that we're putting the automation in place, so that, they can just ship code and not really think about the rest, right? And a good team will also be, a good developer will be cognizant and understand best practices with reliability engineering, but that's not always the case, right? So it really is in the hands of the reliability or DevOps team to understand what's the best tools, or what are the best tools rather, to implement for my company and my team. So, C-suite relies on us, leadership relies on us to tell them what the company needs to keep things online. So that's a lot of pressure on us, right? And so we're not going to take any risks, especially with that level of trust. We're going to be a little bit slower to adopt technology. And I don't think it necessarily always has to be slower. I think it's just the right technology needs to be presented. Like every single day you're seeing, a new autonomous SRE being funded. And I think that's a good dream and a good goalpost. However, if you think about it, when it comes to an outage at 2 a.m, are you truly going to rely on AI to bring you back online, or does a human need to be in the loop, right? If you're talking about a loss of productivity, a loss of revenue, ultimately, I do believe a human has to be in the loop. And so I think we're trying to go from like 0 to 1,000 being like, hey, you don't need a human in the loop anymore. And in reality, we do need humans in the loop. And I think that the tools that empower the engineers to be less reactive and have to be firefighting less ultimately are going to be the ones that will win, because then it's less of, I'm taking away control from the professional and more of, hey, I can help you, sleep at night. I can help to make sure that you have the right information to plan for a big event, or the right information to make sure that a company is also not overspending. So again, when it comes to a reliability or DevOps professional, there's usually also this trade-off that we have to think about between, do I want to be highly available, or am I just going to throw money at the problem? Traditionally, for a while, it felt like, at least in my career, throwing money at the problem was always kind of the easier way out of that trade-off. And now we're starting to see that like companies are kind of coming in and being like, all right, why are my cloud costs so high? Why are we constantly being reactive to some of these issues? And I think those are the problems that AI can help with immediately, because again, that's going to help everyone all around without over rotating to, we don't need humans anymore, because that's just impossible with DevOps and reliability engineering.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess something I ask engineering leaders about AI, and I'm curious your thoughts, because DevOps and reliability engineers have even I don't want to know if it's a difficult needle to find in the haystack, but for many years, obviously engineers have gone through the process of learning code bases, getting familiar with it. I mean, that we all know there's a ramp up period. It's common. The question has been on the engineering side, software engineering side. What happens when something goes wrong and we've been using these tools and we have to go address it, right? We're hoping the AI is going to know exactly where it is and we can just go, slipstream, pick it up and run with it. But engineers have been so used to I've written the code, or I know who's written the code, or at least we have, whatever that is. That will be, I guess, a shift in mentality. I sometimes think that is probably maybe one of the harder, like the little not spoken about parts, the little friction components where engineers are going to have to give up that trust, that confidence of knowing all those details. Do you envision that? Is that just something that it might be just something I'm thinking, but is that something you envision when it comes to more AI tools for your space, that engineers have to get used to that, give it up, or what are your thoughts?
So I'll tell you my opinion. And I had a 9-year career as a site reliability engineer. And so having, pretty much been on call like my entire career right before Thoras, where I would have, loved to have AI help me is, okay, I need to plan for this big event. Present me with the data that I need to set the policies that will help me be successful, right? Whether it's deploying a new application or getting ready for a big product launch and understanding our capacity needs. Now, also, if let's take the traditional site reliability engineering use case of like, okay, I have to wake up at 2 a.m. There's a problem. Now what? I need to understand the scope of the issue. I need to understand where to look and also how to isolate the issue. And that's where I personally would love for AI to help, right? Is, okay, help me understand what's impacted. Maybe, go through logs and help me understand like, where to look. But ultimately, the thing that I personally could not give up is I'm just going to ignore this page and let AI handle it. I think that's probably for me giving up a little bit too much control, to your point, because that time to respond, we actually track that as a KPI. The MTTR is mean time to respond to an alert, is something that you want to keep as low as possible. And so again, until the AI, is to the point where it has the tribal knowledge, understands like every single factor that could go into what created this problem. And, I've seen it all. Sometimes it's like somebody pushed a change, that broke production, or it could be the most random, unanticipated event that led to that outage, right? It would be very difficult for any sort of agentic AI to be aware of all those things, or at least we're far away from that. So I think, to your point, there's a lot of engineers in general who have a general sense of like, there's an appetite for AI, but they're also really worried about, allowing AI to have full control. And again, I know I've been saying it since we started talking, but that's where I think a more sort of incremental adoption plan would be better for the industry in general, instead of just saying like, I'm going to give up control to AI. Like it's just not necessary.
Absolutely. When it comes to the space and what can be, what AI can be applied to, what machine learning can be applied to, what are some of those common things that you see that you go, these are the few low hanging fruit within the industry that we can easily, or not easily, more easily solve compared to maybe others?
And so I thought about this for years. I studied machine learning at Georgia Tech. And I remember as I was like writing my thesis, I kept thinking like, why are we not using even just like these basic ML models to help make these very like high impact decisions, right? Like, why can't I even just use the data? Traditionally we kind of eyeball data to make decisions, but ultimately data is not the driving factor. It's just kind of like our level of comfort. A lot of like guesstimation work goes into reliability engineering. And so for me, the low hanging fruit has always been, okay, let's apply machine learning, right? LLMs and generative AI are really helpful for like natural language processing problems. I've always said this, right? But not everything that we do is in natural language, or a text, is based on like text data, right? A lot of it is numerical analysis, which is, ML's bread and butter. So for me, with Thoras, our wedge product has always been, how can we drive value to not only reliability teams, but the business? Cloud costs are always out of control, right? That's like the first very obvious place to look at. The amount of money that goes to the large cloud providers because of not just user error, but just because of, they're out of their comfort zone otherwise, right? If you're really trying to understand like what capacity needs are, it would require, um, a lot of like statistics and machine learning. So if there is a platform that could provide that for me per service and help me understand what my capacity needs are, that's a very big win. Now, traditionally, a lot of these platforms have been like, the angle that they're coming at is like, we're just a cost savings tool, but that's also how you might lose some of the respect needed from the reliability community. Because again, if we're going to pick cost savings or reliability, we're always going to lean towards reliability. And then so that's where I think there's room for a product that thinks about, workload optimization and efficiency from like an engineering perspective. Cloud cost savings are great. Please help me drive those down. But how are you going to also help improve performance? How are you also going to reduce, engineering hours spent planning for some of these like big events? So for me, the natural first place to look is, how do we scale infrastructure? How do we plan for, for some companies, it's a big product launch. For some companies, just their day-to-day traffic, right? Believe it or not, companies don't use, even though they know what their usage patterns might look like, they might know that, hey, Thursday and Fridays are a big day for us in terms of usage. They're not inherently always using that in their automation stack. It's a lot of times manual scaling that happens. Like, I kid you not, I've talked to so many customers who they just have their engineers literally staring at their usage graphs and fine tuning during those high peak times. Again, by the time you try and, accommodate any like spike in traffic, a lot of times you're already late because there's startup latency. There's other things in play there. So that's one of the big use cases that I always, such an obvious answer to just, rely on ML. And again, there's no loss of control there. It's your data that's being used to drive that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because I think as you're going through that in the use case of ML, we're talking about AI tools specifically targeting, people within the space. It seems like we might make people's lives better. You said it's a thankless job. Obviously there's a lot of stresses per individual person. I guess in the context of making people's lives better, is it a reduction in stress? Is it a reduction in just not, having more data points, feeling less panicked, having cues as to how to make your job more efficient? Because I guess, teams are smaller than some of the other engineering disciplines. So there is a lot of pressure that falls on them. I'm not sure that they'll lose jobs because of these tools, but where does the developer experience, how do you see that improving with these tools and with AI adoption?
I think increasing their confidence in their decisions. So again, instead of making, engineers feel like they're losing control, or in some cases, the way that they're marketed is like, you don't need engineers anymore, which again, in this case is just like not true. But making them feel like they're empowered by the AI technology is, I think, where everyone will feel better, right? Like, so for me, how do I scale and monitor the health of my services, right? The more you can increase my confidence in doing those two things, the better I'm going to feel about the tool. Versus if there is like a lot of, I always tell customers, like if a vendor tells you, hey, our AI is secret sauce, barring like them showing you the code, like there shouldn't really be any secret sauce. Like you can at least tell me about your model architecture, your approach to AI ML, because that's where, at least for me on the other side, I would immediately, that vendor would lose credibility for me, because it's like, again, I am the one that has to answer for a production issue. So like, let me feel very confident about how you would empower our infrastructure stack. The other thing is, it's not even just reliability teams that would be helping, right? It's really I know this is kind of, sounds exaggerative, but like the whole internet. So like, I always like to use Netflix as an example because everybody has a Netflix account. They tried a few months ago to have like a live stream of the Mike Tyson fight, right? And that was new for Netflix, obviously. And so they were not anticipating, or maybe they were anticipating, but ultimately what we learned from that is that they were not equipped to provide such a popular show that was live streamed to millions of people, because, I was getting texts from family members saying like, are you able to watch it? I'm not able to watch it, right? And I felt so bad for the reliability team at Netflix, because that They had the budget, they have the skills, you have the most incredible, like world-class engineers there, but ultimately, you never really know how those things are going to play out. You can do your best, but you don't know how those are going to play out. So the more tools that we have to reduce that unknown, I think the better for everyone, both the consumer of the product as well as the team that's managing that software.
That's that's a great point. It is funny. When I see those things, I'm no longer technical, but I do feel for those teams that are responsible for the reliability side when you see that happen, because you're like, somebody's cell phone pager has been blown up in the last 6 seconds, and it's going to be a really difficult conversation after. And I guess let's actually talk about that, because you see this a lot in cybersecurity, right? And you mentioned it's a thankless job. People really don't see it until they see it, right? And that's a hard job. That you did the job for almost a decade. You're a CEO of a company that deals with the space. That part of the job, is there tooling and AI that comes to help out that aspect, so that there isn't that component of this job? Or is it basically it is a part of the job? There's not much you can do, because when things go wrong, there is nowhere else to point a finger. I guess it's kind of a bit of a tricky question, but I'm curious, because it seems very unfortunate that that's what the first thought, if you're in the technical world, that you're like, damn, that's going to have a rough Monday morning when they go in the office.
I think what you just mentioned is the reason why the reliability industry, despite their hesitations, has to responsibly explore what kinds of AI technology would be complementary to their stack. Because you might just think, we don't need it right now, until there's an issue. And cybersecurity is an excellent example, right? For the longest time, especially 10 years ago, you saw this trend where like cybersecurity was, up and coming more than ever. And, it was like, if you hadn't gotten hacked yet, you pretty much were not shopping for a cyber tool. But like, once you got hacked, you were on it. You were trying to find the best of the best, right? And it's the same thing, like, as companies grow and scale. Okay, you may not have faced a large scale outage yet, or maybe your cloud bill is not crippling just yet. It's good enough. But once those problems, inevitably come up, then you're just reacting to them, right? And you don't want to be in a situation where you're reacting to problems. And so I think, reliability leaders and even engineers themselves should be proactive and not just ignoring, AI if they're hesitant about it, but like exploring, like in this conversation, what we're talking about, like, what are the tools that would actually be complementary and like address my pain points? And that's something that we always tell customers, like, your native hyperscalers are not enough. Like, yeah, you can be 60% over provisioned, and maybe you don't care about cost right now. But the second that, customers are not able to use your platform, or you might have an outage, that's when you're going to start like caring. And we do see that. We do see like sometimes when we're doing demos, we'll see some customers that are like, you don't even need to sell it to me. I'm already shopping for this. We just had this like capacity issue last week where we didn't have enough capacity. Sometimes they're under provision. And, we lost revenue, which, is never good for any company. And that's when they're like, more aggressively shopping for tools. So I would say like every reliability or DevOps professional should be aware of the technology that's out there. I know there's a lot of noise out there and it's kind of overwhelming, but it's really great for your career too. If you can, as the reliability professional, companies rely on us to understand what's viable technology. So the more that we do our research and understand what's going to help us and what's just kind of the fluffy products out there right now, I think, again, is helpful for everyone.
Absolutely. Just curious, last question. You spent a long time working in the space. Your startup obviously reflects the space. I'm always curious when I talk to founders and the ideation process, and when they were like, oh, you know what? I actually might have something here. And having that length of 10 years to work in the space, you probably saw a lot of different problems, use cases, whatnot. When did the light bulb go off for you that Thoras was a viable idea?
So when it first started, like ruminating in my mind was like, again, during my thesis, it was like a mid-level, SRE a few years in my career. And I just kept like thinking that, why are we not using our data to scale infrastructure? It's just seems like such an easy win for everyone, but like not enough for me to take action on it. Again, I never really saw myself as an entrepreneur. I know a lot of entrepreneurs were like, I was born to do this, and I've always wanted to be my own boss. Like that was not it for me. I think like even 5 years ago, Nilo would be shocked at like how crazy I am for having pulled this off. But over time, it genuinely became like my mind was so engulfed after I saw it that I couldn't unsee that there's a better way. Like, using machine learning to make decisions and reliability engineering is just, to me, again, an obvious answer, an obvious next step for the industry. But I would receive a lot of like pushback. Like I would sometimes a couple of times I actually brought it up to like internal product teams or just see what like my peers would say. And they were like, especially when AI first blew up after GPT, I remember having a conversation with the team I was working with at the time, and they were like, oh, this is just going to go away the way like NFTs are going away, or like, which is crazy because I feel that the world has changed. I'm sure everyone feels that the world has changed as we know it. But again, that's kind of gives you a glimpse of like how some folks in the industry might perceive AI as like, maybe it's not going to be helpful. I think now everyone is kind of racing to adopt AI. And so that's a little bit different now, but yeah, over the years, I would say, after that initial sort of rumination, it took like probably like 2 to 3 more years where it was like, all right, I have to just stop what I'm doing, to the point where I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't focus on anything else. And so ultimately, like some advice I would give founders, and I know not everyone can do this. And for me, it was a while until I could. Ultimately, when I decided to quit my job, everything else took a backseat, right? And that's when I started moving the needle. That's when I was able to actually get customers, raise funding, and give the company the attention and the dream, really the attention that it needed. So yeah, entrepreneurship was not in the cards for me initially, but I was truly inspired by like how obvious the answer is to the problem I was facing at work.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it when a founder, sees a problem and then without really ever wanting to be, starting my own business, is like, I got to solve this this issue that I've been seeing and thinking about. So fantastic story. Nilo, I know obviously you guys we could talk about this, and what we guys at Thoras probably for double the length of this episode. But if somebody does want to learn more, either about your background or the company, what's a good way of connecting?
Yeah, so Thoras AI is where you can book a demo, take a look at our offerings. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I believe the endpoint is Nilo-DevOps, or just search Nilo Rahmani, and feel free to connect with me.
Okay, awesome. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Amir.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, 2 things. Had a chance to talk about AI adoption for the observability market, and Nilo was gracious enough to dive into that for us, and we uncovered that. We talked about ML being applied to the problem. We talked a little bit about what they do over at Thoras AI, and some of the stress and pressures of being in the space. I think that does not get spoken about enough, so I'm glad we talked about that as well. So share this with somebody else who might benefit from listening to the episode. I'd appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.